All right, hello, whether it is you watching from the comfort of your own home on your own laptop or watching this on your phone while you're taking a walk or kind of just listening while you're driving to work or school. Thank you for your time and attention. I take that very seriously. This talk, seminar, course, webinar, whatever you want to call it, has been a long time coming. And it's my hope that this will be a fundamental resource for aspiring doctors and future doctors, really, and their families to better understand what the entire medical school admissions process looks like and how to get really started on building out your perfect pre-med years. So without further ado, let me make myself a bit smaller here and let's get into it. So the title of this talk is very simple and straightforward. I want it to be very understandable by anyone who comes by it. It's titled How to Get into Medical School. Everything future doctors and their parents need to know how to start building their perfect pre-med years. Okay. So actually, before we get there, we're going to go on this long journey here today. So it'll be very important to know what to expect from me. Here are a couple of things that I imagine you're going to learn with me today. So some of the things we'll learn together: who this seminar is for, why you must be intentional with your pre-med journey, how hard is it to get into medical school, how much time do you have to become a competitive pre-med, what could possibly happen financially, emotionally, if you don't build out your perfect pre-med years, what are the consequences, what are some of the application steps to earning my white coat, and what are the most important parts of each of those steps of the application. I know my head is kind of in the way there, so I apologize in advance. What do medical schools look for or want in a pre-med? What are the AAMC's core competencies? You may have heard that phrase. What are the only 6 levers that matter in admissions? And what are things that you can or cannot change about your odds? The big question, of course, that everyone's here to kind of answer is how do I stand out to admissions committees so I can earn acceptances to my dream medical schools? After we get through all of that, I want to get even more tactical and practical with you by developing this sort of year-by-year guide to support you if you had started your pre-med years from day one as a freshman. I suppose that most of you probably are not day one freshmen, so this is a modifiable timeline that you can adjust to wherever you are in your journey. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll give you some places and resources that I love to find further research should you need it. And lastly, the most importantly, I want you to take action, and I'll give you some of the actionable steps that you can take right now after hearing this entire talk. So, that's a lot, right? So let's kind of simplify it all. I want to make sure that you're in the right place. So if you fall in any of the following categories, I think you'll find today's talk useful. If you are, a pre-med undergrad student feeling lost or feeling behind and wants to optimize their chances at their dream school, this is for you. If you're an engaged parent who wants to support your hardworking child's dream of becoming a doctor, this is for you. If you're a junior or a senior in high school thinking about becoming a physician, yes, this is for you. And if you're a professional in entirely different fields, maybe you're a firefighter or a baker or a chef or a carpenter, and are thinking about changing careers into this beloved one that we call medicine, this is also for you. Okay, so I'm grateful already that you've spent some time listening to me jabber on, so perhaps this is an appropriate time to introduce myself. Well, my name is Michael, and I'm a proud Southern California native. I graduated from UCLA in 2019 with a degree in neuroscience. I'm happy to say that I earned the highest Latin honors and also minored in biomedical research. I say this not to kind of brag or impress you, but to really demonstrate or impress upon you that the success or relative success that I earned in my undergraduate years, I feel are directly predicated to my to the foresights or really to the fact that I was very intentional with the way that I spent my time. I ended up going straight into medical school without a gap year. landing a spot here at my dream medical school here at UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine, where I'm hopeful to graduate in 2023. I'm happy to say that I will be applying into the orthopedic surgery match next year, and if all goes well, I will hopefully have kind of a home for the next 6 or 7 years of training. Pre-med advising wise, I've been doing this since I applied my junior year back in my junior year in 2018, quite a while ago. My advising has been done in a variety of contexts, from just kind of one-off texts to people who have quick questions about medical school and how to get in, to more involved sessions involving 30 to 90 even younger freshmen and sophomore pre-meds who were more interested in learning a little bit more about the details of getting in and building a strong medical school application. I used to host these sessions after these midterm review sessions. I used to be a molecular biology PLF, peer learning facilitator or tutor, for 30 to 90 of these people, and after we would go through 3 or 4 hours of molecular biology stuff to prepare them for the midterm, we'd also go through another 1 or 2 hours just answering everyone's pre-med questions and getting on the whiteboard and getting real tactical. Other contexts of advising, I've been kind of in the quote-unquote industry for 2+ years. If you've Googled anything related to medical school admissions, you'll find big names like BMO or Med School Insiders or Shemasian Academic Consulting, all of which who offer pre-med advising, MCAT tutoring, MCAT courses, and application support. I spent 2-ish years in that overall industry, building out content and supporting pre-meds. So I kind of have seen the field from a variety of different lenses. But I think the most important thing for me is that I'm a big believer that your pre-med years shouldn't be this hard. And I think that's the most important thing on this page. And if it shouldn't be this hard, you might think that should give you an excuse to kind of take your foot off the gas pedal. But one of the core lessons that I want to leave you with today is to be very, very intentional with your pre-med years. Okay? And why must you be intentional with your pre-med years? In fact, I think the language here is a little bit soft. I'll actually double down and say that you must be intentional with your pre-med years. The first reason that comes up to me is just how competitive medical school currently is, and in the future, how it will continue to be increasingly hard to get into. Well, a lot of people know that it's hard to get in, but don't fully know how hard it is to get into medical school. So let's go ahead and actually talk about it. How hard is it to get into medical school? Well, from 2018 to 2021, you can see here on the little Chromebook picture that 155,000 pre-meds apply to medical school over those 3 years. Every year, that's about 51,720 pre-meds every single year. And if you're like me and don't really understand what 51,000 looks like, you can see this picture of the beautiful Staples Center packed brim to brim. You can see people in the nosebleeds with their binoculars trying to see kind of the action on the floor. Staples Center has a capacity of 20,000 people. So that means that 2.5 Staples Centers are filled every year with pre-med applicants. My medical school class has 150 people. I mean, you can do the math. It's difficult to get into medical school. We'll delve into this kind of figure here. This is the infamous table A23 by the AAMC, and I'll kind of go deeper into its details in a bit. But for now, what I do want to talk about is the second reason you should be intentional with your pre-med years. And it's that most students are often surprised at how little time they truly have before they have to actually apply to medical school. So, I mean, I guess that leads to the specific question, Michael, how much time do I actually have to become a competitive pre-med? And so I think the best way to do that, the best way for me to describe that for you today is to kind of hop on my iPad and build out this timeline for you so you get a good sense of how much time you actually have. let me hook this up real quickly. And here we go. We're in business. All right. So the question is, how much time do I have to become a competitive pre-med? Okay. So let's just kind of work backwards from your white coat, and we'll see how much time we actually have. So let's say is your pretty standard traditional college process. First year, second year, we have your third year, and your fourth year. Excuse me, I'm trying to become a doctor, so the handwriting is going to be a bit rough. We have fall, we have winter, we have spring. This is a quarter system, so if you are on a semester system, you can adjust accordingly. Fall, winter, spring, summer. Okay. So if you kind of took the most traditional path, and I'm not saying that you should or you need to, but just for the sake of demonstrating the timeline, let's say if you're like me, you went straight into medical school right after undergrad. What that would look like is graduating college, and then right after that summer, you start medical school. So specifically here, you have in this summer right here, let's just say August, that's usually when they happen, you get white coated. So congratulations, you are now a medical student with your very own white coat with your name engraved on it. And I mentioned right before that, you would graduate kind of college in the spring. Great. So graduating college, I actually don't believe is a requirement to apply to medical school. I think you just need, not apply, but get into medical school. I think you just need the prerequisites. I'm not sure. Someone should fact check me on that. But basically, I bring that up to say that this portion right here doesn't really have too much relevance when we're talking about earning your white coat. So how does one earn a white coat? Well, the thing immediately before earning a white coat is you must get accepted, right? Okay, well, the question is, how do you get accepted? Well, the thing usually right before an acceptance is an interview. So let's kind of draw this out. Your interview season typically goes from, I would say, kind of early spring to fall to early spring of your fourth year. Let's just say that. Okay, so let's say you're interviewing, and before you even get an interview, what must you do? Well, you actually have to submit your secondary applications, and that happens kind of the summer before your interviews. Okay, so secondaries. And how do you even get a secondary application? Well, you have to submit what we call the primary application, and that is open most times around June and submitted around there. Okay, so that is your primary application. Okay, so what is a primary application? What goes on it? We'll talk all about that in excruciating detail in a bit. But I want to kind of demonstrate to you that if you want to go to medical school straight through, you must apply by this time, June of your third year. And a lot of people will recognize that there's not a lot of time there. If you are literally a freshman day one, this is you right here, you have 2.75 years, or let's say 8 quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 7, 8 quarters, 2 summers. If you're on the semester system, then you have 5 semesters and 2 summers to really build out your entire application. And that might not seem scary to you, but your application has a lot of stuff on it, right? We'll talk about this later, but I call these the 6 levers: GPA, MCAT, extracurriculars, your letters of rec, your school list, and then your actual written and interview. So written application, so the things we were talking about, your primary and your secondary, as well as your interviews. Okay, all of that, well, not really 5 and 6, but at least 1 through 4, GPA, MCAT, extracurriculars, letters of recommendation, all must be done in quality and strong by the time you get to third year spring. It's not a lot of time. Okay, so if you're taking some time off and I love applicants who do so intentionally. Then you'll just add the additional time. But let's actually go back to the board. Even if you take 1 year, which is kind of a very common journey nowadays, taking one gap year. Even if you take one gap year, let me draw this for you. Instead of applying this June of your third year, you're going to apply June of your senior year. And you might say, hey, that's one whole year to do everything else. And that's true. But think about the year that you're getting, right? Because you're not getting a year blank full time to do all this stuff. You are also happening to be earning your bachelor's of science or your bachelor's of arts. So even if you get your third year spring, your third year summer, your fourth year fall, your fourth year winter, it's not like you have 180 hours a week to dedicate to something. You're still a student full time. So I always recommend people kind of create this timeline so they can get a sense of, hey, how much time do I actually have left? And other than working on my medical school application, building that out intentionally, what other things am I responsible for, right? Your fourth year might have pretty difficult courses. So that extra year that you took off might not actually give you as much time as you'd like. Okay. So the last reason I urge, get back to the slideshow here. The last reason that I urge people to be intentional about their pre-med journey is that I found that getting into medical school may be one of the most important things in your life up until this point. Most pre-meds don't have families. I certainly did, or I certainly did not have my own family or are married. And so this is a huge event that many pre-meds, for better or for worse, judge their capabilities on and build their self-esteem or their confidence around. Again, I'm not saying this is the best thing, but the reality is that this is a huge measuring stick for many aspiring doctors in their 20s. And so I don't love sharing these consequences, but I think my job here today is to get you into medical school, or at least get you closer to getting into medical school. And part of that is revealing some of the realities that I found true in my own journey, that of my friends is, and those are the thousands of pre-meds that I've supported over the last 7 years. So let's kind of get into that. What could possibly happen financially, emotionally, if you don't build out your perfect pre-med years? And again, I want to be very, very clear here. I'm a big fan of gap years, taking time off. I think you should do it very intentionally. But sometimes I found that people kind of lean on gap years because they're afraid of facing all that they have to get done. I mean, those 4 things, your GPA, your MCAT, your letters of recommendation, and all your extracurriculars, that's a lot of things to do. And it's overwhelming to become a competitive pre-med if you want to do it on your timeline. So what I've seen more often than not is that time passes and the reality becomes more overwhelming until pre-meds are forced to confront the fact that maybe they can't apply to medical school when they wanted to. Again, not the worst thing, but worst, in my opinion, is that their pre-med years then require a lot of overhaul, maybe a complete makeover of their GPA and their extracurriculars and their MCAT. It might take an additional 3 to 4 years. Some people at that point who might have become excellent physicians turn the other way and decide to go with something else. Again, medicine's not the perfect career. And if you decide against it intentionally with your very own reasons, I love that for you. But if you are walking this path blindly and then are forced to kind of turn away when a mentor, maybe it's me, maybe it's someone else, could have helped you process the overwhelming beast that is medical school admissions, then I truthfully find that to be unfortunate. So I'll share a couple of things that I felt were important to me and reminded me that I needed to be intentional and have a sense of urgency with my pre-med journey. So these are what I thought about in my journey. It doesn't mean that it applies to you, but I hope that it does share some of the reasons that I think it's important for pre-meds to actively think about their journey. Okay? So some of the things that I considered: competitiveness in my training, the power of optionality. So I recognize that the more competitive your application is, the more options you have, right? I know that there's a common phrase in the pre-med community that says I'd be happy to get one acceptance. And that's true. I definitely feel that way with orthopedic surgery. If there's one program that wants me, I'll take it, But I think that if you're going to work so hard over your 3 pre-med years, 3, 4, 5, 6, however much long it takes, you're going to grind and get through all the rigmarole and all the disrespect and all the hard work, then I think you should kind of have the gall to dream bigger and have the option of going where you want to go. This was huge for me, right? I ended up going to my dream medical school right by my family and my support system, and it's been everything that I've ever wanted. So I wanted to become competitive because I wanted the option. And then the second point I bring up here is application saving. Sometimes there are people who get to their application time, let's say they wanted to apply senior year and senior year now, and they realize that their application is not as strong as they'd like. Maybe their GPA is a little bit lower. Maybe their MCAT is a little bit lower. Maybe their extracurriculars aren't as strong. And sometimes they go to these companies, the industry, as I kind of mentioned earlier, and pay a heaping load of money to save their application, right? On the order of tens of fifteens of twenties of thousands of dollars to get people to personally edit every one of their words, right? Every piece of their work and activity section, every piece of their personal statement, every single secondary gets edited by a application consultant. And then when it's interview time, they do mock interviews into the ground, right? And that's expensive. And I bring up the kind of concept of primary versus secondary care. We certainly have many medications to manage something like diabetes, but that can be very expensive. Imagine having to take insulin shots like on a daily basis, right? Versus primary care, which is preventing yourself from getting there in the first place, right? Making sure your diet, your exercise is all lined up so that you never even flirt with the disease that is diabetes. Same goes with your pre-med journey. I believe that if you've built out a strong set of pre-med years, your extracurriculars, your GPA, everything's kind of on point, then you can write a so-so application, but you'll still shine because the raw material, the things that are actually on your application, your actual extracurriculars, your actual letters of recommendation will speak for you. Right? But I think the opposite is not true. If you have a weak application and you pay to save your application and you have these consultants write you the best application that's ever been written in all time, it has a ceiling because the raw materials aren't as great. Excuse my language, but there's a funny phrase in plastic surgery that I'm always reminded of when I talk about this concept. And it's that plastic surgeons often say, you can't make chicken salad from chicken shit. and I don't want your pre-med application to be chicken shit. I want you to build it so that it is, chicken gold, and making chicken salad is easy, Okay, my eventual career options. So this is also something to consider. Back when I was a pre-med, step one is pass and fail, but now it's not. So there are fewer and fewer things to kind of delineate you from your competition, and one thing that I think will not change is the benefits and the resources of a big name medical school, right? Maybe the name doesn't matter that much. Maybe you can argue that UCLA is the same as Harvard, is the same as University of Iowa, is the same as University of Miami, right? I can probably argue the opposite, but I will say that something that I think is not as arguable is the resources available, right? UCLA has its medical students engage in clinical training at the Ronald Reagan Hospital, which is the number 3 hospital in the nation. There are big resources available to these bigger name medical schools, and I wanted to become competitive because I wanted those resources for my career. If I were to go into something competitive, like I am in orthopedic surgery, it's important to have those resources to build out my eventual resume. And then emotions and self-esteem. I think these are actually more important than any of the things that I mentioned above. I felt really behind. I felt like I was not enough. I felt like I had a ceiling personally when I was a pre-med. I always felt like I was an imposter, and I'm sure many people listening to this can identify with that emotion. I wanted to be competitive. I wanted to be intentional during my pre-med years because I hated feeling that way. So I was on top of my application almost as kind of a emotional avoidance mechanism to not feel that pain. And then I think for me personally, the most important thing is that my decisions don't affect just me. It affects my entire family. Certain specialties have lifetime earnings that are higher than others. Orthopedic surgeons make a sick amount of money compared to other specialties, right? I don't know if it's right or it's wrong, but I think it's a consideration because those lifetime earnings can really affect my family and the generations that come after me. And delaying retirement. I wanted to get into medical school on my own timeline so that I could set expectations with my parents because they have been helping me through my high school, middle school, all of my childhood. So I wanted to make sure that I could let them know when I was expecting to help them. And if I took 1 or 2 years off, that might mean that they take 1 or 2 more years to work to kind of sustain their own finances. But if I were to get into medical school early, I could get a job earlier, I could make some attending money earlier, and that was important for me personally. Again, and to double down, these are things that I considered. I just wanted to share these to share some of the things that I think that are at stake. They might not all apply to you, or they might all apply to you, but the overall discussion should be had. Like, why are you embarking on this extremely long journey, and what are some of the factors that are driving your decision to be intentional and to be urgent and to take this seriously, right? And I guess to double down, I want to make it very explicit that the journey into medical school isn't a race. You don't need to beat anyone. Okay, and this is actually a manifesto that I wrote back in senior year of undergrad. I kind of read this to you here. It's don't jump the gun. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't get in over your head. There are many idioms that describe the same things, having Herculean aspirations without the appropriate due diligence. I want to make this clear. The 4-year timeline that I wrote back then and the one that I'm going to share with you now is the fast track into medical school. It's a traditional no gap year path. If you adhere to it generally, you'll find yourself prepared to start right after you graduate from college. But again, medicine is not a race, and I encourage you to take this entire journey at your own pace. In fact, this is just a case study, really, of how I moved through my own undergraduate years to act as a general guide or framework for your own journey. So don't succumb to personal or external pressures. Take your time, and you'll be happier and healthier and more ready than ever to change the lives of the patients that you will eventually touch. Okay, so now that I've kind of framed what this piece is all going to be about, let's spend some actual time getting into the nitty-gritty, getting into the practical, getting into the details. In short, let's help you get into medical school. Okay, so I've found that the most important thing for pre-meds to understand is the overall timeline. So let's work backward from our dream goal, putting on a white coat. Okay, so there you see me on my bottom left there. That is kind of blocked out, but that's Royce Hall, UCLA, August of 2019. That's my MS1 year. That's my white coat ceremony. And we talked about it earlier. In order to earn a white coat, what must you earn? Well, you must earn an acceptance voice or email. This is a example of one that I received that I will cherish forever because it was my very first acceptance, and it completely changed the trajectory of me and my family's life. I'd like to share with you today.
Michael, it's Dr. Adias at USC. I'm calling to congratulate you on your acceptance to the medical school and tell you how much the committee loves you and how happy I would be to have you in our class. And so, though it'll be a day or two before your email can go out, I didn't want to waste any time letting you know. So once again, congratulations, young man. It's well deserved.
Yeah. So I'll never forget that, and I hope that it's something that when you receive it, you keep as well. So this happened around November, December, my senior year. It was early. I was happy to say that it was early in my application cycle, and I remember receiving it. I was doing some lab work in the neuroscience research building at UCLA. Before you can earn an acceptance voice or email, you must, like we talked about, interview. This is a picture of my actual USC interview. I am happy to say that I look exactly the freaking same. Maybe less wrinkles. but this was the Keck School of Medicine in Los Angeles. Before you earn an interview, you must submit some secondaries. And this is an example of the Google Docs of one of my students and good friends. She wrote 92 pages of writing with 56,000 words and 300,000 some characters. You can see for every school that she applied to, around 25 to 30, from Albert Einstein to California to Boston to Columbia. These secondaries I did personally in the summer after my junior year, from June to August of 2018. And they were all done at some poor Starbucks cafe that I showed up to every single morning incessantly in San Diego, California. Before you submit your secondaries, you must submit your primary application. That's me. That's me, junior year. I remember submitting my application on June 1st of 2018, right when it opened on the 7th floor of my dorm, which was called Sproul Landing at UCLA. That's not me like actually submitting it. Just me kind of, probably that's what I looked like when I did submit it eventually, though. And before you submit your primary application, as we talked about before, we must prepare to develop all the things that are required on that application. I call those the pre-application years. And that started for me in September 2015 when I first stepped foot on UCLA's campus as a freshman. And it lasted until I submitted my primary application. That's me, refereeing intramural basketball as kind of a youngin'. Okay, so let's just summarize that journey here, and then we'll kind of delve into the core components of each part of the application. So visually, it'll look like this, right? You have your pre-application years, which is something that we should all be focusing on to develop our application. Then we have to submit our primary application. Then that becomes our secondary application. Then that becomes our interviews, and hopefully that whole package is good enough to earn an acceptance. Right now, you don't have to worry about your interviews, your secondary, or writing your personal application. But what you do need to worry about is what goes on your primary application, because those are the things that you must focus on during your pre-application or your early pre-med years. And so let's just answer the question everyone's asking. What goes on that primary application? Okay, so we talked about it earlier. I call them the 6 levers here. Lever 1, your GPA, and below it are some of the most common questions or most important things that I think you should take away from today's talk, right? So lever 1, your GPA. So how much does your GPA matter? All other versus BCPM GPA, we'll talk about that, and some upward trends. Lever 2, your MCAT. Why is the MCAT important? That's a good question. What are my chances with an X.YZ GPA and an A.B.C MCAT score, right? This is the most common question I get. Hey, I have a 3.82 GPA and a 512 MCAT. Like, what are my chances? What should I do, right? So we'll talk about that. Lever 3, extracurriculars. What extracurriculars do you absolutely need? And again, we kind of talked about this earlier, but what are the AAMC's core competencies? And the big question, how can I stand out to my dream medical schools and earn acceptance or earn a seat there? Lever 4, letters of recommendation. What does a strong letter of rec look like? How many do I need and how do I get them? And then lever 5 and 6, which are a little bit later on, but the school list, where you'll actually be applying to medical school. And then the written or the spoken application, basically what you're going to write and on your primary and secondary application, and then your interviews. For both of those, how important is the school list of the application process? And number 6 is how can I prepare for my personal statement, my work and activity section, my secondaries, and my interviews years in advance. And I want to be very clear. This is the most important thing practically when it comes to understanding how to get into medical school. Because these are the only things that will eventually end up on your medical school application. So we can actually go ahead and change the question on the left from what goes on your application to what are the only things that matter. It's just these 6 levers, right? There's some small nuanced stuff like rolling admissions, letters of intent, Casper and Casper-like exams. But those are when you're actually applying. So we won't worry about that for now. But again, I want to be very clear. If you can maximize each of these 6 levers, you will get closer to building the quote-unquote perfect medical school application, or the one that at least has the highest odds at earning an acceptance to your dream medical school. And to prove to you that this is literally all that goes on your application, I want you to see a real application. In fact, I'll show you mine. Here we go. That's my actual application. I've kind of redacted some stuff so that people don't show up at my humble abode. But the 2019 entering class, that was me. I submitted this. Oh, give me 1 second. All right, so this is my actual application. You'll see that there's some contact information, some biographic information, childhood, parents and guardians, siblings. Okay, that's my academic record with my eventual GPA, my MCAT. Okay, so this is level 1 right here, GPA, right? We'll talk about BCPM. We'll talk about all others in a bit. The MCAT is the second lever that's there, right, as promised. The third one are your extracurriculars, or they call it your work and activities section. You'll see that I have, 15 entries here. Okay. And then after that, you'll see the personal comments, also known as the personal statements section of the application. That was my personal statement, about a page and a half. Then you'll have lever 4, your letters of recommendation. Lever 5, your school list. And then kind of, I call the writing here, lever 6, kind of that's like the written portion of your application, which eventually then becomes your secondary and then your interviews. But you'll see here, that's literally all of it, right? This is my school list, and these are my letters of recommendation. That is it. That is all that an application consists of. So let's get back to this. So let's go ahead and actually go through each of these levers in detail, starting with the big lever, lever 1, GPA. A very common question is, how much does my GPA matter? And I'll get back to this because your GPA is actually in combination with your MCAT. These two academic metrics help medical schools understand whether you can handle the speed and the rigor of a medical school curriculum. It's like drinking water from a fire hose is something that you might have heard very often, and it's very much like that. It's a lot of information that you're going to be tested on very quickly. So having a strong GPA, having a strong MCAT score gives medical schools some confidence that you can handle that. All other AO versus BCPM GPA, I just want to bring that up because it is very common to have students who have maybe stronger science GPAs but weaker all other GPAs. Maybe they didn't do great on their writing courses or their GEs. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that BCPM stands for Bio, Chem, Physics, and Math. It's also known as your science GPA, and that's, again, traditionally the more important one because medical schools want to know that you can handle the science curriculum. And the most important question for me is, what can I do with a weak GPA? Again, we kind of get back to primary versus secondary care. Anyone who has a GPA knows just how fickle it is, right? It's very hard to raise your GPA, but very, very easy to drop your GPA from a 3.9 to a 3.7, right? With one bad quarter. So protecting your GPA, making sure that you never get diabetes, you never get that weak GPA in the first place is what I would spend a lot of time on. But if you have the need for secondary or tertiary care, you need to ameliorate or improve your GPA, there's plenty of ways to do it. I have a personal GPA calculator that can show you just what your maximum GPA is based on the amount of units that you envision taking. I'll kind of pull that up right now. All right, so this is just an example, but let's say you have a 3.852 GPA and the current number of points that you have. I can kind of describe that in a later video, but let's say you have 350 points. If you say you only get A minuses for the rest of your college career, and you say that you're going to take maybe 50 more units, what will your GPA be? Well, it'll be 3.798, right? And that's the mean GPA for MD matriculants. If you want to see how much it's going to take to get your GPA to, 3.95, you can see that if I take 50 units to get all straight A's, I'll bump it from 3.85 to 3.9, right? If I want to get 3.95, let's see if I take 100 units, what happens? I get to 3.93. So again, you can see, even if I have 100 units of straight A's, which is a lot, That's 4 quarters straight of A's. I barely bump my GPA 0.7, right? Okay. So you can use things like this to understand what your ceiling is, what the math looks like. And you can also engage in some of these post-bac or SMP programs. My favorite resource for people looking to protect their GPA is to learn how to study better. Ali Abdal has a wonderful Skillshare course that I've watched multiple times now, and it's a core reason that I study as well as I do. Then other things to recognize: that your science GPA is more important than your all other GPA. Remember, the point of all this is to see if you can handle the science curriculum, right? If you can handle your science grades and you're just really bad at, introduction to modern art of the Middle East, then I'm less concerned. You can also counter a strong or balance a weak GPA with a strong MCAT score. And then upward trends is another concept where maybe you started freshman year and you were far from home, and you just didn't really acclimate as well as you would have liked in the beginning. And that's okay, right? That's very understandable. A lot of people can resonate with that. And you kind of turned your ship around in sophomore, senior year. You went ahead and got 4.0, and your overall GPA maybe is like, 3.81, just because you really butchered your freshman year. That's okay, because you have a very strong upward trend, and the student that I recognize now is the one that's gotten all straight A's for the last 3 years, and we can kind of overlook the freshman year transition. And there's personal explanations. Maybe you've had someone in your family get sick, or you were in an accident. That's always a good way to just, again, give context to a weaker GPA. And for me, the most important is to build your appropriate school list. I think some students with academic metrics, GPA and MCAT, that are on the lower end love to swing for the fences, and I love that for them. I think that's a great idea, especially if the rest of their application is strong. But it also should mean that you build a school list that's appropriate for your academic metrics. I don't want you to only apply to the top 30 medical schools if you have a 3.5 and a 505 MCAT, right? In fact, that would be a nightmare. You want to make sure that you are maximizing lever 5, your school list, in context with your lever 1 and 2. Okay? So, I have personal resources on my YouTube channel. There's a couple of videos here that detail some of my understandings of the most effective scientific ways to study. And we even kind of go into the discipline or motivational part of studying in this video in the top right, how to study when you don't feel like it, because I think that's half the battle. Let's go to lever 2 here.
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel.
Lever 2 here is the MCAT. So what are my chances with X.YZ GPA and A.B.C MCAT? Well, I told you that I would go back to table 23, and so let's do that here. Table 23 shows you over the last 3 years what the statistics really are, right? So what does it look like for someone who has a 517 MCAT or more and a greater than 3.8 GPA? Well, it looks like there were 8,000 people over the last 3 years that had those stats. And of those people, 9,000 people. And of those people, 8,000 of them got in, or about 5 out of 6, I would say, leading to an 86.6% acceptance rate. You can also see the overall here. So over the last 3 years, that 150,000 number, with only 65,000 getting accepted, for an overall acceptance rate of 42.3%, right? So you can kind of play and see, hey, if I had a 505 MCAT with my 3.75 GPA, I'd be in this bucket. If I could raise my GPA to 3.8, then I might have a higher chance. I might be in this 44% bucket. Remember, these are statistics, so they apply to kind of populations and not to individuals, right? You either get into medical school or you don't. You don't have a 44% chance of getting into medical school. It's just that people with your statistics got into medical school 44% of the time, right? So make sure that you're not getting too in love with some of these metrics. And the last thing that I want to bring up is that these are the highest stat applicants, right? They have greater than 517, which I believe is like the top 5% of MCAT test takers. They have greater than a 3.8 GPA, and yet 14% of them, 1,200 of them didn't get into medical school. But let me be clear, they didn't get into a single medical school. These people probably applied to 25 to 30 medical schools, right? That, again, suggests that your GPA and your MCAT is not everything. There are other parts of the application that you must prioritize and get right. Because, I mean, there are people here with a 2.8 to 2.9. And I know with less than a 500 MCAT, and there's 745 over the last 3 years, and I know the odds aren't great, 11%, but these are people who are actually getting into medical school, right? Again, showing you that your GPA and your MCAT cannot be everything. Let's go back to the slideshow. All right. So next question, when should I take the MCAT and how can I prepare for the MCAT? We'll do both of those kind of on the iPad as well. But I recommend about 12 weeks full-time. Full-time is around 40 hours a week. And to have also 2 other activities to keep yourself sane. I did Spanish at a community college, and then I also coached some basketball on the weekends. How can I prepare for the MCAT? Well, you should finish the prerequisite coursework, and I'll talk to you about that. And some of the recommended resources I have currently at this stage include UWorld, of course, the AAMC official bundle, because they write the test. Blueprint has a set of 4 to 6 exams that I think are very representative. And then just having one set of content books. People go crazy with the content books and they read them cover to cover, and you don't need that. You really need them kind of as an encyclopedia or as a reference to remind you of these core concepts in case you forgot them throughout your undergrad years. And the most important thing, I think, is having a detailed personal plan that balances content versus review phases. I think if you're earlier on, you should focus on content, but that doesn't mean that you ignore. My fault. I'm not talking about review. I'm talking about application. So in the beginning, I think you should focus maybe 60%, 70% on content, but don't ignore the application questions, like actually doing practice problems, actually doing passages. That should be 30 to 40% of your time. And then in the second half of your studying, I think you should flip and become very heavy on the application phase and focus on the content questions and the practice exams and make that be 70% of your time, and then have content kind of sprinkled on the back end when you're tired or you need to review some sort of concepts that you've forgotten. So let's get in the nitty gritty here and go and return to the Zoom, to the iPad, so I can walk you through when you should take it and how you can prepare for it. Okay, so remember, this is just my timeline, and you can modulate it as you'd like. But if you are going to apply to medical school here, right? Let's say you're applying here, your June of your third year spring quarter. Your primary application must have the MCAT, right? And how long does it take for the MCAT to come back? Well, it takes about a month. Okay. So if we're going to apply in June, the latest we can write our MCAT is 1 month before June, which is May, right? But I don't love taking in May, and I'll give you plenty of reasons why. Right? If I take it here in this winter block, it's not like I have, again, all my time to myself. I have nothing else to think about. In fact, I have a lot to think about. I have winter quarter. I probably am taking 20 units of upper division courses in my third year, right? That's not an easy quarter for me. For me, I took like Neuroscience 101B, and then I had my research, and then a neuroscience elective. It was a lot of work. That's the same reason I don't like taking it here, because again, I'm taking neuroanatomy, I'm taking electrophysiology, I'm taking molecular neuroscience. These are tough courses that I don't want to compete with when I'm studying for the MCAT as well. And so if we go even further back, then this looks like a great spot. And this is actually when I took it, because this is a time that's free. I don't have any other commitments when it comes to my academics. I'm taking 0 units, and it's a good 12-week area where I can take advantage of and use that to study full time. So that's what I did, and that's what I do recommend. You might not have this same timeline. You might even be past your second year summer, but the same principles apply, right? Look for a time where you're protected, or it's 12 weeks-ish of protected time where nothing else can really compete for that attention. But if you're going to take the MCAT here, I mentioned that you must kind of finish your prerequisite coursework. So what is on the MCAT? Well, it's a great question. Let's go into it. The MCAT is 4 sections, right? So one is not biochem, my apologies. One is chem phys, and specifically chem is general chem, OChem, and then all the physicses. Okay. Number 2 is cars, which is kind of reading comprehension. You don't really need to prepare for that. You don't need to prepare for that in the sense that you don't need to take specific undergrad coursework for it. Of course, you're going to need to study for it while you're studying for the MCAT. Number 3 is biochem. And number 4 is psychology and sociology. Okay. So if you look at these courses, I'm going to kind of talk about the UCLA equivalents because I know those best, but I'm sure your school has something like that. Gen Chem is Chem 14A and B. OChem is C and D. So that's 4 courses. Physics is Physics 5A, B, and C. Bio and Biochem at UCLA, it's called LS7A, B, and C. And Biochem is Biochem 153A. And then Psych at UCLA is Psych 10. And then Sociology 1. Okay? So I personally feel like psychology and sociology is something that you can self-study. Right? So you don't need to take these courses if you don't want to. Biochem 153A, I think, is crucial. LS7 ABC, crucial. Physics ABC, crucial. Chem 14 ABCD, crucial. Notice that I didn't mention some of these courses, right? I didn't mention at UCLA it's called LS30A or B, or Math 31A, B 32A, B, right? There's no math courses that you need. Consequently, there's no statistics courses that you need for the MCAT. In addition, I didn't say courses like Chem 14 BL, right? I didn't say Chem 14 CL. Lab classes, I don't think that they are relevant for the MCAT. And the same goes with LS23L, a bio lab. Okay? So when you kind of add all these up, that's 4, that's 3, that's 3, that's 1, and then kind of optional 2. But let's see, on the most lean version, it's 7, 10, 11 courses, which is not a few. Like they're pretty substantial courses, right? 11 courses by the time you're at your sophomore second year. Again, this is a very standard traditional pathway. It might not be for you, but I want to start with kind of the foundational, fundamental one so that you can modulate and create your own timeline with the same principles that I'm thinking about, which is I need to finish these prerequisites before I study for the MCAT. I need to find the right time to study for the MCAT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you really have these 6, maybe even 7, right? If you do something like study abroad, which is what I did, study abroad physics, knocked all of it out in one go. But you have those 7 quarters to really finish those 11 courses, right? So plan for it as you may, but if you'd like to take the MCAT and when I think is most optimal, you'll be most fresh if you finish all of those 11 courses in those 7 quarters and then go straight into studying for this MCAT exam in the summer after your sophomore year. Okay, let us see here. Okay, so that is that. Let me stop my screen share here and go back to the slide deck. Okay, so we talked about that. I know we started briefly to talk about what are my chances with table 23 in the AAMC. I go into that in much more detail in this video titled Your Medical School Chances Are Higher Than You Think. In fact, you can see table A23 in the background here. So this explores the relationship that your GPA and MCAT has overall with your overall chances at admission. If you're interested in that, you can certainly
Let's play 2 truths and a lie.
Check that out. There's my apartment with my wonderful greenery. We'll go to level 3 now. Extracurricular activities. So one of the more common questions are, what are the possible extracurricular activities? Well, there's only really 18 that are available when you eventually apply to medical school. They are as follows. Move this here. Artistic endeavors, community service that are medical, community service is not medical, conferences, extracurricular activities, hobbies, honors, athletics, leadership, military service, other, some paid employment, again, medical and not medical, and then physician shadowing, presentations, posters, publications, research lab, teaching, tutoring, or teaching assistant. So these are really the only 18 categories that they allow for you to input extracurriculars into. It's, again, good for you to see, but I don't think it's that useful. The next thing that people talk about are the AAMC core competencies. This is basically what the medical school governing body has said is important for their incoming medical students to have, and I've pulled it up here. These are 15 core competencies for entering medical students, as defined below, that have been endorsed by their group, and they fall into 4 categories: the intrapersonal, interpersonal, thinking and reasoning, and science. So, I mean, you can see here, it's like service orientation, social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, ethics, reliability, resilience, capacity for improvement, critical thinking, living systems, human behaviors, yada, yada. Okay. So, I mean, it's helpful, and it's great that they have a mission to have eventual doctors have these competencies and these values and core traits. But for a pre-med looking to get into medical school, it's kind of hard to really make that useful. For example, how do I demonstrate social skills? Like, that's hard to do, right? There's no easy way to do that. Okay? So I think the most easy or practical way of thinking about this is to kind of address what extracurriculars do I need? And the second question, which is more important, how can I stand out to my dream medical schools through my extracurricular activities? So for the extracurriculars that you need, I recommend that you have substantial quality in the following experiences. I think you should have some active clinical experience where you're engaging in patients, really working closely with them. I think you should have some quality non-clinical experiences so that you're spending your time doing things that are outside of medicine. You're not a pre-med robot, right? I think you should certainly have some shadowing because it's important for you to understand what physicians do. And I think you should do it in different contexts, right? So you should do it in the hospital. You should do it in a nursing home. You should do it in a hospice care facility. You can do it outpatient. You can do it in an ICU, right? Getting experience looking at medicine, you can do it globally at different contexts and environments is really important. I think you should have some leadership activities because medical schools have a propensity to want to admit medical students who can lead their own initiatives, right? Be passionate about something and really take it from beginning to end, leading it all the way through. And some team-based activities. Medicine is a very, very team-based profession. You're going to be reaching out to nurses and social workers and having some practice managing expectations, managing people. Like customer service is a great way of doing this, being a waiter, something like this, where you can work well within the team. That's important. And then you should for sure have some sort of it factor or a standout factor. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next question. And then there's some things that are plus or minus. I don't think everyone needs research, but I think it is important because we make a lot of decisions based on what medication should we do? What procedures should we do? What does the evidence say? We base it all on the scientific literature, and having some understanding of reading research and conducting research can be very helpful to better interpret that. Again, you don't need it. You're not trying to become a PhD researcher, but I think it's important for medical students and eventually doctors to have some sort of familiarity with PubMed and searching through the literature and making your own decisions based on what you're reading. And some sort of teaching or mentorship. Medicine often is an academic profession where what you learn, you pass on to the next person, you teach. So having some sort of experience there, I found to be something that was often talked about in my interviews. So the big question is, how can I stand out to my dream medical schools through my extracurricular activities? And this is a long discussion that I have that lasts hours with my individual students. But in one sentence, the way that you're going to stand out is you have to make a serious difference. And if that sounds so simple and so much easier to say than done, it should be like that, right? It should be hard to stand out to medical schools. It should be hard to make a serious difference, right? For example, how do you become the greatest shooter of all time? Like, I'm talking about basketball, right? How is Steph Curry arguably one of the greatest shooters of all time? Well, he just makes all of his shots. That's very simple, right? But how does he do that? That's the art. Same thing here. How do you stand out? Well, you just make a serious difference. You make a serious impact with medical schools, and you will stand out as a result. How do you do that? Well, there's a positive feedback loop that I think everyone should be very well acquainted with. Let me kind of get back to the iPad. And it is as such. So if you care about something, chances are you're going to spend more time doing it, right? If I care about basketball, I'll spend more time playing basketball. If I spend more time playing basketball, chances are I'll get better at it, right? And if I get better at basketball, if it becomes more fun, I'll make a bigger impact, right? I'll make a bigger difference. And if I'm seeing the results, if I'm seeing the momentum of me making a bigger impact, of me making a bigger difference, then you'll want to spend more time doing it, because everyone loves positive results. Everyone loves momentum. It might even make you care about it more, right? You're realizing just the impact and the amount of people you can change and help for the better. And this virtuous cycle just continues to loop forward and loop forward. And eventually, you end up creating something that has a huge impact, right? Again, very simple, overarching thought process, but the fundamentals are the same. You must care about something. You must want to spend time on it. You must, and in doing so, you'll become better at it. You'll make your impact, and et cetera, and it'll move forward. But a lot of people looking for their it factor are looking in places where they genuinely don't care, right? They're looking for a science lab that does hematopoietic stem cell research just because it sounds impressive, but they don't actually care about it. And that will never be your it factor because, again, you don't care about it, and you're going to exit this virtuous cycle and never make the impact that you'd like. So that is, again, a really long discussion, and we've really only talked about it for a couple minutes here, but thankfully there's I've kind of broken the iceberg here in one of the favorite videos I've ever made, and it's titled How Basketball Got Me Into Medical School. And you can see it again here on YouTube. This explores how important it is to pursue extracurricular activities that are personally meaningful, not again from just a happiness point of view, but from a competitive point of view. Basketball is one of the things that I talked most about during my interview trail. You can see kind of the intro here.
NBA player by day, a doctor by night. I told this to everyone who asked me what I wanted to be. Some caveats, though. I was 8. I thought I'd grow to NBA size. And I figured doctors were real-life mages. The ones that cast healing spells. Until now, no one has pressed me to answer, why medicine? Because aspiring to be in the NBA as a 4-foot-tall Vietnamese boy was more provocative. That was the actual introduction to my personal statement. The same.
Yes, it was. That started off my personal statement and was a recurring theme throughout most of my medical school application. Okay, so let's go on to the next lever here. Lever 4 are letters of recommendation. So how many do you need? Well, you need 2 science ones. My example was a physics study abroad one, and the second one was my research PI, or my boss in my research lab, if I've gotten some course credit. At UCLA, it was SRP 99, SRP 199. You need 1 non-science one. For me, that was the Intro to Buddhism course that I took with Dr. Hayes. And then some miscellaneous ones if you'd like, but these are past requirements. That was my health services research and another physician I shadowed that kind of rounded out my recommendations to 5. What does a strong letter of recommendation look like? Well, it should be personal. It should be specific. It should be clear about your strengths and your possible contributions to the medical schools that are interested in you. It shouldn't just really say your grade, and it shouldn't say your ID number, because that's all that the professor really knows about you. Those are the weakest letters of recommendation. How do I earn strong letters of rec? Well, I think you have to be strategic, have foresight, and look at all your options, right? If you know your 4-year plan and you know what professors you're going to take when, you can kind of get a sense, do some research from upperclassmen and say, like, hey, is this person kind of someone that is friendly, easy to get to know, someone who's willing to kind of develop a relationship with their students, or is this someone who kind of just shows up, does their job, and then never really responds to emails or anything? Maybe that person isn't really a good person to try and develop a relationship with, right? I mean, above all else, it does come down to just building a real relationship. So think about your contact channels. Is it before class? The professor comes early to kind of chat with students. Is it after class? Stays after to answer questions? Is it through email where they're very active? Is it through a discussion forum, right? As one of my students got her letter of recommendation by being really active on the school's biochem discussion forum and really helping students out. And the professor noted that and gave her kudos, and that was kind of the seed of their relationship. Do they have office hours where no one really comes, right? My intro to Buddhism office hours, literally I was the only one for 10 straight weeks, because everyone else, I guess, was just an English major who didn't really need help, and I was a neuroscience major trying to understand how to write these freaking essays, and it was a good opportunity for me to earn an A, but also develop a relationship with this guy. Okay, so above all else, don't overcomplicate things and be impressive. Again, it should sound easier said than done, right? If you want someone to write strong things about you, they should feel strongly about you, right? So if I am doing research with my professor and I want this letter of recommendation to say something like, this is the best thing since Michael's the best thing since sliced bread, then I better be putting in the extra hours. I better be pushing in the project. I better be doing the most to make sure that I'm helping his project go forward. If I do that, if I really focus on how can I do the best that I can in this role that I've been given, your letter of recommendation will come naturally. You don't need to send a special email. You don't need to draft a perfect CV or ask the right way. You don't need to be strategic, because you've done the most important part. You are impressive. The professor thinks you're impressive, and writing a strong letter of recommendation comes naturally after that. So don't ever overestimate or overcomplicate these processes. If you want a strong letter of recommendation, be a strong student. And if you want to see an actual letter of recommendation, that would be pretty magical. Wouldn't that? Well, good thing that I'm in the business of making magic. That transition was terrible, sorry. But this is my actual UCLA Medical School letter of recommendation, and I review it all the way from beginning to end. All right, my friends, another day. Yep, so that's me. You'll see probably I believe it was the health services letter of recommendation that was written on my behalf. Okay? So let's move on to the last two levers here, levers 5 and 6, the school list and the actual application. Again, don't forget that medical school admissions is holistic. We looked at table A23 earlier, suggesting that even if you have the greatest GPA and the greatest MCAT in the country, you have still a 15% chance of not getting in because perhaps the rest of your application is weak. So I often find that these pre-meds still hold on to this antiquated belief that only your GPA and your MCAT matter. And I want to be really explicit. They are huge parts of your application, so please don't drop the ball on them. But in today's day and age, they are not enough. And I see comments like this all the time. Here's a comment on TikTok just a day ago. Let's be real, those people with those stats didn't get in. Those stats were really high stats, 3.9, 517 MCAT or something like this. We're applying to top medical schools is why. I mean, and I agree. And I said, and or their letters, extracurriculars, written application or interview was suboptimal. Every single part matters, right? And this is an example of another student with extremely high stats. This is kind of a snapshot earlier in her application cycle. I use her as an example because she has sky-high stats. Again, kind of like a 3.95, 520 MCAT. But she was rejected through and through from schools people would consider safeties for her stats. Schools like UCR, Boston, Rochester, Davis, right? To me, it demonstrates the fact that your GPA and your MCAT, even if it's perfect, I mean, 3.95, 520 is as good as it gets, only really gets you in the door, right? The remainder of your application, your letters of rec, your extracurriculars, your written application, your interviews, the rest of your levers, those are the things that really earn you a seat at the table. Okay? And then the actual application, if you're a couple of years from it, I don't think you need to think too much about it, like too much actually about writing it. You should think about what's on it. That's the whole point of this presentation. But one question that you should think about is, how can I prepare for my actual application years in advance when you actually have to sit down and write all of it? One, you're already doing that in that you're recognizing what will go on the application. And you have to prepare content as it's fresh, right? When you write your application, you'll benefit from having real patient stories and real emotions that you felt when you were earlier on in the process. And one way to do that is to document or journal these, or vlog yourself and record yourself to remember some of the emotions and the stories that you experienced. Here's one of mine way back when, and you can see how rudimentary this can be, right? This is not the greatest example because it doesn't have an example of great patient story to something to hold on, but getting into this habit of recording how you felt or what you thought right after you felt and thought it will be very useful if and when you apply to medical school. So here I wrote, this is a family medicine physician I shadowed. Dr. Chen mainly deals with preventative medicine, vaccinations, blood draws, lab testing. She reads the results and prescribes accordingly. She's kind of a jack of all trades. She starts large and will refer, I don't quite know what that means, but will refer any serious problems outwards to specialists. Charismatic and passionate, and will be aggressive in order to get a necessary point across. Reveals all aspects of bodily systems, general lifestyle choices, etc. So you can see, this is me very young in my understanding of medicine. And I actually think this is fascinating because at this point in my life, this is how I understood family medicine. Well, there's this like charismatic and passionate woman. She can be very aggressive if she really wants you to lose weight. She looks at everything from the way that you eat to the way that you exercise. And if things are a little bit more complicated, she sets up your appointments with subspecialists so that you get the care that you need, right? I just love that this is how I saw medicine earlier on, and if I could write something similar now about how I see family medicine, you could really see the development over time. Okay? So I encourage you to do the same with your own extracurriculars. And so those are actually the 6 levers, the only 6 things you have to perfect or optimize over your pre-med years. Wouldn't it be magical to see some real successful pre-med applications? Well, you already know I'm in the business of magic, so I'll do you one better. I'll give you the full application of a high-stat individual who actually got in nowhere, right? This is Ben. He had a 3.8 GPA, 517 MCAT. He earned 0 acceptances, and I go through the entire application from beginning to end. You'll see this is his AMCAS app here, 3.77 total GPA, got a 512, then a 517, which is in the 95th percentile. He was a health coach for 600 hours. He was 140 hours of education in underserved populations. He even had 2 publications and 1 poster, but he didn't get 3, nor 2, nor 1. He had 0 acceptances. And hey guys. That's me. And I'll do you even one better than that. I'll show you the revisions he made to his application. You'll see on the left here, it's the same full AMCAS app. Nothing really changes. But then he ends up with a California medical school acceptance, specifically to the University of California, Irvine, where he's very, very happy now. So that just, I think, to me, demonstrates the importances of lever 5 and 6, making sure that you have the right school list and that your written materials are strong. But I'll do you even one better than that, and I'll show you the strongest medical school application I have ever had the pleasure of reviewing. On the right here, we have Steve, who got in practically everywhere he applied. He ended up with a full ride scholarship to a top 10 medical school. The man literally gets paid to go to medical school, and it's because his pre-med years were built so intentionally. He did it so thoughtfully and so well that every medical school was pining for him. And you'll see some of the stuff on his application here. 3.9 total GPA, 519 MCAT, 720 hours of Scribe America, TA for prison education program, which was his standout factor, and then 800 hours of some cognitive neuroscience research. Ends up with a full ride to a top 10 medical school.
All right, another day.
All right. Okay. So, moving forward, I think the 6 levers is certainly one way to look at medical school, but I think another helpful way to do so is to look at it temporally, right? The common pre-med question I get is, what should I be doing right now, say as a sophomore in undergrad? Well, I want to break that down for you. So here's a modifiable year-by-year guide to getting into medical school. Let's get it here. All right. So we have freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. And I want to make sure to double click on the word modifiable, because I imagine most of you aren't day one freshmen who can follow this timeline to the T. But I still think the fundamentals and the overall thought process is important. So that's why, this is going to be a process or a journey or a timeline that can be personalized so that it's custom fit for you. And let me show you how to do that here. So how to personalize this process, the core tenets, the idea is always AWB, always work backward. So start with, when do you want to put on your white coat? It's going to be in August sometime. 2020, what? Is it 2025, 2027, 2029, 2030, 2035, 2024, right? When is it for you? 2 is, your primary application will be due June the year prior to that, right? So June 2020, whatever X is, -1. So if you want to put on your white coat in 2023, you're going to apply in June of 2022. And you can change the years accordingly. So maybe that's not freshman year, but it's just when you're submitting your primary application, -2 years, right? So let's say you want to put your white coat in 2023, then you would apply in 2022, and then this quote-unquote freshman year would be just called your 2020 year, right? Hopefully that makes sense. And then lastly, you don't have to spend year by year strict to this timeline that I'm proposing. You can compile the years, you can constrain, you can combine the goals and the mentality as you see fit to make sure that it is appropriate for your own journey. Okay? So let's get to the first year. For some, it may be freshman year, and for others, it'll be primary application year -2. So we're going to clear the grocery aisles. Let me explain here. So freshman year, primary year application -2 years, clear the grocery aisles is the goal. And the concepts here are fundamentals and range. I want you to go steady, and I want you to try absolutely everything. So let's focus on the fundamentals and the range. First and foremost, fundamentals, by that I mean the fundamentals of learning, right? Your GPA is very important at this stage when you're starting out because you have 0 units. Pain is temporary, GPA is forever, is a quote that you may have heard. And I think it's funny, but I think it's very, very true. I think your health and your loved ones should come first before anything, before your GPA. But your GPA should 100% come way before shadowing, research, clinical experience, volunteering, etc. All of that stuff you can do later. It's not important at this stage right now. If you can handle your GPA, you're getting 4.0s with ease, not even breaking a sweat, then yeah, maybe you can fold those in slowly, right? But if you're struggling just a wee bit and you have any doubts about your GPA, stop. Don't do anything else. Just stop and focus only on your GPA, because your GPA, per the quote, is forever. We know that you can do things to ameliorate your GPA, but if you're a freshman or 2 years out from your application, please just focus on that. That is what I would recommend. Second, clear the grocery aisles. By that I mean, I want you to literally try everything on the grocery aisle. Take everything down, right? I want you to have these small, bite-sized exposures to every extracurricular. If you're interested in intramural basketball, join the intramural basketball teams. If you're interested in, theater, join improv, right? If you're interested in stand-up comedy, go and join that club and participate on the weekends, right? Try everything. And by bite-sized, I mean, I encourage 30 to 50 hours, just really immersing yourself in that club, being really involved, seeing if it's really for you. Because you don't know what you quite care about completely at this point, but the best way to find out is to take these small bites of everything. You're young, you have a lot of energy, use that time to get to know people, get to know the activities on campus, try everything. And then 3, build healthy habits. A lot of people try to find these tips and tricks and secrets, but they ignore the Holy Trinity. If you sleep correctly, you exercise well, and you fuel your body with nutritious food, you will be very surprised how powerful your body will become, right? That's almost the only thing that you really need to focus on, right? You don't need special vitamins. You don't need a certain workout routine. You need to move your body, you need to rest your body, and you need to fuel your body. And if you optimize those things, you'll be very surprised how far you can go. And then learn to self-experiment. I think people follow kind of willy-nilly the advice of their mentors and people on social media. But who knows? Maybe you study really well in bed. I mean, I don't. I find it really, really difficult. But maybe you do. Or maybe you study really well with lo-fi at a coffee shop. Or maybe you found that you like working out best at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I can't do that. I will fall asleep. Or maybe you find that when you watch Netflix at night, you feel really relaxed. And that is the best thing for you to recharge and reset, right? Experiment. Do these things. Try it all. Write it all down, see how you feel, so that you can kind of build out these healthy habits that are fit for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the second year. For some, it might be the sophomore year, and for others, it'll be primary application year -1. We're actually going to go ahead and season to taste and then test. So let me explain here. The goals are to protect your GPA, continue to do that, and experiment to find what you care about. Okay, so let's talk about it. Season to taste here. I want you to refine your learning style and protect your GPA, right? Above all else, you need to protect your GPA. If that means dropping a clinical experience that you work so hard to get, if that means dropping shadowing that you work so hard to get, just drop it, right? We cannot have your GPA drop to dangerous levels. We want to keep it as high as possible, because you can remind yourself from table A23, the higher your GPA, the easier, or the better odds that you have at earning a seat at the table. So if that means watching Ali Abdal's Skillshare course, if that means getting a personal tutor just for physics or just for biochem because you really struggle with those things, do whatever it takes. You need to protect your GPA, especially earlier in your sophomore year. If you're kind of following a traditional path, you can consider taking the MCAT per the timeline that we built before. It would be finishing all your prerequisites and then taking it the summer after your sophomore year. And then get more involved. A lot of young premeds tell me that they have nothing to offer these PIs, these research labs, or these clinical experiences because they're so young. They don't have that much experience. And that's fine. You might not have 2 years of experience doing flow cytometry, but you do have your youth and your interest, right? And those are extremely valuable. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've gotten just by telling them, hey, look, I'm willing to dedicate 2 to 3 years to this project, especially if you are, and I'm really interested in what you guys do. And that's all. I can train you how to do flow cytometry. I can train you how to handle the mice and do the surgeries. But I can't train someone to have interest and care about something. And I certainly cannot hold you here in undergrad so that I can milk 3 or 4 more years of labor out of you, right? If you are young and you are interested, leverage that and continue to leverage that to find the opportunities that you truly care about. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to our third year. For some, it may be junior year, and for others, again, it'll be the year you submit your primary application. So we are going to prepare our plates for presentation. Okay, we're going to double down on our strengths and firm up our weaknesses. Let's talk about it. So know your opportunity cost. This is a big year for you. You're about to submit your actual application to medical school. So know that if you get a 93% in class, 93% in a class, and you get 102% in class, let's say in order to get 102% in, neuroscience M101C, it'll cost you an extra 20 hours of studying. But recognize that both of those are still A's. 93%, 102% still an A. It won't change anything about your GPA. And know that for practically speaking, 3.85 GPA is pretty much the same as a 3.81 GPA. Know, though, that if you have 0 shadowing hours, that is very, very different from 20 shadowing hours or 50 shadowing hours, right? So that same 20 hours, the one that you could have used to bump up your 93% to a 102%, or God forbid, get an A- and drop your 3.85 GPA to a 3.81 GPA, you could have used those 20 or 25 hours to put in to shadowing, to really build out the weaknesses in your application, especially if you have 0, right? I'm going to skip down to the bottom here. Don't get thrown out. This is kind of the same concept here. You don't have to be the best at everything, but you can't have red flags. You can't have 0 shadowing. You can't have no non-science letters of recommendation. You can't have non-quality clinical experiences, right? You need those things kind of as fundamentals to just apply to medical school. And so know the opportunity cost, know where your time is going, and prioritize firming up your weaknesses. Let's now talk about doubling down on your strengths, right? If your goal is to get into your dream medical school, you're going to have to stand out amongst the 50,000 applicants every single year. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think your hospital volunteering, answering and picking up phones, and then providing patients water and blankets, that's great, but it's probably not going to wow your dream medical school, right? So think about your application, think about what your strengths are and what you want to highlight. Is it your teaching? Is it your mentorship? Is it your prison education program? Is it your healthcare application because you study computer science and you're into that? Is it your nonprofit? Is it your teaching and mentorship? Is it basketball, right? What is it? Find that nugget and double down on it during this year, because you want to make sure that that has the highest impact possible. Okay? All right. So that is a huge year for you. And if you've accomplished getting through that junior year, submitting your primary application, that summer you'll submit your secondary applications, and then you'll kind of flow into your senior year. This is when we're going to take pride in our story and our journey, and we're going to wait for Gordon Ramsay to judge us and celebrate our victory regardless. Okay? So hopefully all goes well, and we get to celebrate the good times, and you get your interviews throughout your 4th year. So you kind of be juggling school and flying all across the country, but I want you to enjoy it. Remember that the interview is for you and for the medical school, right? If schools are interested, they want to impress you as well, especially if you're a superstar pre-med. Remember Steve earlier on this presentation, who got in practically everywhere and now is on that full ride scholarship? People like Steve are really hard to come by, and so they really, really want to make sure that they're impressing you at the same time. And I feel like when I recognize that, that makes me feel a little bit better about my nerves and my anxiety, because I want to see if it's a good fit for both of us. It's not just them kind of evaluating me. And then enjoy your freedom. This might be the last time before you get this much protected time again. I mean, I graduated a quarter early. I had got into medical school pretty early in the application cycle, around November. And I wasn't going to start medical school until the next August. So I really had 10 months there where everything was chill. And I really got to enjoy my time. So those are the 4 years and the things that I think you should be focusing on in each of those years. Again, modifiable per your own journey. And one thing that I kind of want to also impress upon you is this analogy of flying through your pre-med years, right? I think when you fly, there's a lot of work when you take off, right? You get off the landing pad and get into the air. Then you have a long kind of cruise time, maybe 10, 15 hours if you're going to, I don't know, Japan or Vietnam. And then you focus again really, really deeply when it's time to land and touch down back into the airport. And the reason I bring up this analogy is because I feel like your pre-med years should be very much like this. I encourage people to have a very dedicated, a very intense takeoff session, right? 30 or 60 days where they find the mentors, they find the resources, and they really plan out their pre-med years intentionally. When do I want my white coat? When am I going to apply? When am I going to take my MCAT? What classes am I going to take? When am I going to take them? What extracurriculars do I need to look for, right? When am I going to have the opportunity to do 2 weeks of shadowing full time, right? Planning all of these things really intentionally. That would be the intense takeoff portion. Then you kind of cruise through your freshman, sophomore, junior year. You're maintaining your grades. You're living your college life. But you are kind of resting easy, knowing that you have a very specific and dedicated plan to build out your pre-med application by the time that you are planning to apply, right? And so when it's time now to kind of touch down and actually apply to medical school, you're ready. You've already optimized all 6 of your levers, your GPA, your MCAT. You've gotten the extracurriculars that you wanted. You have your standout it factor, right? You've gotten your letters of recommendation because you thought about that in advance. You're intentional with it. You thought about your school list, and now it's really, and most importantly, or not most importantly, but equally as important, you've also logged years and years of your emotions and your stories when you were volunteering at the hospital, or when you were coaching intramural basketball, or when you were helping a patient lose weight over 14 weeks. You have these stories and these raw emotions that now all you really need to do is copy and paste and format into your personal statement and your secondaries. And you are really flying like business class through your pre-med journey because you've been intentional through it all. That is kind of my dream for you. So we spent a lot of time discussing how the logistics of medical school admissions, and equally important, I think I want to talk about the mindset that pre-meds should have in order to succeed in this long, arduous journey. So here are some of the pre-med mindsets, I think, for those who make it. And the first one in gray is the most important, right? You are exactly where you need to be. You don't need to feel like you need to catch up or that you're behind. You are here exactly where you need to be in your pre-med journey, and you are learning what you need to do to plan out the rest of your wonderful journey, right? I hope your pre-med journey gets created into a blockbuster movie, because this is the point where the engine turns on and we really put it into nitro and go forward, okay? So a couple of things that I want to impress upon you. Number one, care only about what you can change and forget what you can't. How can I raise my grades is something that you can change, right? Can I get a tutor? Can I go to Ali Abdal? Can I talk to my TAs? Can I talk to my professors about how to improve my understanding of these concepts? That's something you can change. Forget what you cannot change. A question that I often get is, does where I go to undergrad matter for admissions? Yeah, it does. Maybe it doesn't. But the fact of the matter is that unless you're going to transfer, you can't change that. And if you're going to transfer, then let's have this discussion, because it'll play into whether or not you do. But if you're not going to transfer, then don't worry about it. Worry about the things that you can change. Number 2, revisit the 6 levers constantly. Always think about, hey, what can I do for my letters of recommendation? Can I build my relationships a little bit better this semester? Hey, what extracurriculars am I kind of looking for? How can I make my impact in those extracurriculars? How can I contribute more to my team? Are there any projects that I'm passionate about starting that can really help my community health fair club, right? Can I bring pharmacists to my health fairs to help elderly patients reconcile or kind of simplify their medication regimens, right? Think about the 6 levers constantly and revisit them. Number 3, quit spending time on things that you don't care about, right? Yes, even if others say that you should do it, stop spending time on things you don't care about, because those things are going to take away time from things that you do care about. And remember that positive, virtuous cycle. If you spend more time on things, chances are you get better at them. You'll make a bigger impact. And when you make a bigger impact, you might care about it more. You might spend more time on it. So don't spend time on things that you don't care about, because that time is really, really exponential. Number 4, get help. Be self-aware, right? The fastest way to improve at something is to find a nerd at that thing and learn from them, right? If I wanted to learn how to play Smash Ultimate, which I'm currently doing, I am watching the best of the best play and I'm studying them. That's the best way to do it. If you want to get into medical school, maybe you find an admissions committee member that is willing to talk to you. Maybe you find a pre-med advisor, someone like me, and ask me your questions, right? Find help. There should be no stigma. This is a complicated journey. There's a lot that's going on. And if you need it, go ask for it, right? Number 5, the most important thing, kind of blocks by my face, of course, is that the only way to be an impressive pre-med, the only way to really stand out is to be impressive, is to stand out, is to make an impact. Again, there's no secrets, and it sounds way simpler than it is in reality, but if you are going to be impressive, if you are going to start your own nonprofit, if you are going to publish in Nature, if you are going to start a prison education program that helps folks in the justice system earn their degrees and reacclimate to society, it's going to be hard. It should be hard, right? That is what the most meaningful things on this planet are. They're hard to do. If you're going to build the next Amazon, I promise you it's not going to be easy. But I think it can come back to the do what you love positive feedback loop, right? If you do what you love, you'll spend more time in it. You'll get better at it. You'll make a bigger impact, and you'll spend more time on it. Do that and get some help. Be self-aware of what your weaknesses are, and you will find yourself strategically doing the things that you love and becoming more competitive in the medical school admissions process at the very same time. So I want to leave you with a mission to do your due diligence and conduct any other research that you need to do to get to your dream medical school. I think you can do that. And here are a couple of things that I think can start you on your way. Find a mentor. Ask for help, right? Ask me if you'd like. Your journey will be specific to you. Research yourself first. Try to figure out questions and answers to your own questions first, but also just have a low threshold to ask. There are a couple of mentors in my life that I ask constantly, and it's a positive relationship for everyone involved. Just ask. And then my favorite resources for your GPA, I have my YouTube videos, as you know, but I love Ali Abdal's Skillshare course. I've watched that thing twice now. Building Relationships. A pivotal book in my life is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's great for building friendships and relationships and improving my relationships with my parents, and for our cases, building relationships with our letter recommendation writers. Habit formation. I owe a lot of my success to the habits that I've created over the years. Atomic Habits by James Clear is a book that I recommend and gift incessantly. And everything else, you're smart, you're young, you know how to use tech. Use Google and find the answers that you need. Okay? So let's just take all of this a step further and give you some actionable steps to take literally right now so that at the end of this hour and 40 minutes, we have learned something that has gotten you closer to medical school. Okay? So actionable steps to take right now. Remember, AWB, always work backward. When is your white coat? Work backward and develop a plan of attack today. Create a timeline today, right? And audit your 6 levers. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And make a plan for doubling down on your strengths and improving your weaknesses. Remember, medical school admissions is not complicated. It's simple. But that doesn't mean it's easy, right? It's simple. There's really only 6 things, and we've gone over them today. But it is not easy, okay? Third, protect your time. What are you doing that you don't care about? Quit those immediately. And then what do you say that you care about but you aren't doing, right? Investigate. Do you actually care about that, or are there reasons why you're not spending time on it, right? And here's a great video of a dashboard that I have with all of my advising students that we use to always keep track of these 6 levers, right? You can see here at the top. It starts with, when do you want to start in medical school? I'd cry if I got into these medical schools. So we're thinking about our dream medical schools, some alternatives in case things go awry. Then we have lever 1, our GPA. What's our major? What tracks are we engaged in? What are our requirements? You can see here the GPA simulator that we talked about earlier in this seminar. My numbers compared to my top medical school choices. So where do I stand? There's my transcript. Here's my lever 2, my MCAT plan. The student's not quite there yet, but we will kind of populate that when it's time. Then we have our extracurriculars table, all 15 of these, everything from skiing to traveling to matriculating to the Yang Lab to an editor at an undergraduate student journal to a camp counselor to hospital shadowing. Like all of it we put down here, including the hours of week, whether we're currently doing it, what type of research, what type of extracurricular does it fall into? Remember, we had those 18 categories in the beginning. And then we're journaling, right? I absolutely love this job. It's honestly one of the things I look forward to at UCLA. I knew going to college I wanted to work at the library, right? It's these are things that we are going to hold on to, because when it's time to write our medical school applications, we're going to copy and paste these real emotions that we felt. Okay. So we have our resume and our CV still in level 3, some of the next steps that we should take every quarter, month, or week, some of the questions that my student has currently right now. So when should I take physics 5C? So we're getting really practical, right? And then here's a summary. We have level 4, 5, and 6 on the right side here. We're kind of developing those as we speak, but we have a plan for every single lever, right? Priorities to protect our GPA. Okay, so are we working on creating an easy schedule? Are we finding the academic support that we need? We have a personal tutor. We have AAP. Lever 2, when do we plan for taking the MCAT? When do I even register for the MCAT, right? So I have a reminder set for my student here. What recommended resources should I take, or should I buy and use? And what's my dedicated timeline, my sample MCAT schedule? Going down to level 3, extracurriculars. Level 4, we have the outline the possibilities for my letters of recommendations of what classes am I going to take in the next year that I could possibly ask for a letter of rec for, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so I ask that you guys build out these dashboards for yourself. It can be as simple as a pen and paper. But if you're interested in kind of having one of these built out for you, if you're interested in working with me a little bit directly, I'd be happy and honored, really, to support your medical school journey. And even if you don't work with me directly, I hope that this has been informational for you. But if you are and want to get in contact with me, here are a couple ways of doing just that. I'm available on Instagram and Messenger. Those are both ways to kind of speak with me one-on-one directly through chat. That's best if you're interested in more one-on-one advising. Please also join my weekly email newsletter, and I'll send you all the resources from the seminar, including the videos and the links to Table A23, and I'll even send you kind of a PDF of the iPad walkthrough that we did today. And lastly, there's my email address there. Please email me if you are part of an organization that would like me to kind of do a Q&A or talk and meet with your members. I love doing these club talks and meeting pre-meds across the nation. Or if you have any long-form thoughts about what content I should create next or things like this. Or if you would also just be more interested in sharing with me your entire story and want to work more closely one-on-one with each other, I think email is also a good way to get into contact with me. So that is the end of this. Thank you very much. I would full screen my video, but last time I did that, the whole video recording software crashed and I lost everything. So thank you for staying all the way to the end. If you did, please subscribe to the channel for more long-form content if you found this helpful. I'm hoping that this training got you a 10,000-foot view of everything, literally everything that is important in medical school admissions. And again, it's simple. I'm sure that you could give this talk now after hearing it once, but it's not easy, right? Earning a 3.95 GPA is hard. Earning a 520 on the MCAT is very hard. Only 2% of people do it, right? Having a standout extracurricular activity like helping people in the justice system earn biology degrees, that's really hard to do. And it only happens when you align the things that you care about with your time. So all of those things, you know now that you need to do them. Let's go ahead and work together to figure out how to do them. Okay? So again, whether you're at home on a walk or driving somewhere, I hope this was helpful for you. Please stay in contact through Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and my email. And I hope to work with you guys soon, or at the very least, I hope to help you guys along your medical school journey in any way, shape, or form. Thank you again for your time and attention. Hope you have a great rest of your day.